Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. We are joined by Justin Jones. He is an activist, a well-known activist, and we've talked about all that he's been involved in the last week or so with the protests and even last year up at the state capitol. We have a lot of calls, and I just want to start getting to the calls. So let's go to Gerard, I believe. Go right ahead.
Yeah, there's two things he's going to have to change before he changes anything else. One of those is qualified immunity law that was listed in 1982, put in effect in 1982, that protects public officials and police only. The next thing you're going to have to change is get rid of the union, the police union. All unions need to go that are representing public servants. Those two things are going to have to be changed before you get any change done on. But if you can get those changed, you look up that qualified immunity law, read about it. It's on the books in 1982 when it was put into effect. And read that because it'll be of great interest to you.
Okay.
And I admire you for trying to change things and make it better for your generation and future generations, because this generation has certainly made a mess of it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you quickly want to comment on that? What do you think about what he said?
I kind of couldn't hear everything, but about the qualified immunity, giving politicians, I guess, the police officers special privileges, definitely, I think we should examine that.
All right. We'll just keep going through the calls here. Let's go to Renee. Hello, Renee.
Hi there. Good evening. Thanks for taking my call. So I have three things to say. One, I just want to really applaud this young man for doing what he's doing. He reminds me of myself 50 years ago when I was very much an activist in my hometown of Detroit, Michigan, and I recall the brilliant young men and women that were my mentors. So he is carrying the torch forward, and I'm very proud of him, and I hope he continues to do so. The second thing I want to mention is that this thing about these statutes, many people such as Bill Lee and the others here in Tennessee and other states are either reluctant or just downright refusing to remove these statutes. And I don't know if they really know, I know they say ignorance is bliss, but by them refusing to admit that these statutes, though may be historic, are a type of history that I would not want to recall, because that recalls a history that their forefathers perpetrated that is no less than a Holocaust against another group of people, and that they've yet to atone for their actions. So I think it's an arrogance and just a cynicism and a refusal to admit the facts. And perhaps this is why our country is starting to deteriorate and decline.
Okay.
And finally, this is a little lighthearted thing here. When I first saw this young man was when he had first been arrested, I think, some couple of months ago, and I can't remember the charge, but it was something to do with his activism. And from that first moment, I looked at him and I said, oh my goodness, he reminds me of my first love when I was like 10 years old. He was just exactly like Dan. I'm like, oh my God. And every time I see him, he reminds me of my little first love when I was 10. This little guy lived at the street behind me, and every morning I would run through the alley and go sit on the porch with him.
All right. Well, that's very sweet.
Oh my God, I can't believe he was
okay. All right, we're gonna move on, but I think that's very nice. So that's a compliment. It sounds like you remind her of her 10-year-old first love.
Well, thank you.
You talked about the first time you were arrested. Yeah. I mean, because the whole Cassida thing, we really haven't even talked about that. You were arrested, charges were dropped there. You were charged, charges were dropped. I mean, it's astounding.
And one thing about the monument I want to bring up, because I thank you for bringing up the monument again. I want to just make clear that monument to Nathan Bedford Forrest in the Capitol went up in 1978. It's not an ancient history monument. It's a monument that went up in direct resistance to the civil rights movement. And the black community here in Nashville protested it in 1978 and are still protesting it to this day. And so it's not this historic, symbol that has this great, rich history. It's something that's current and that has a clear message. And so definitely agree that we should remove it.
Well, let's go to Gail here. Hello, Gail.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
My question is, if it was just a civilian car standing out there, would he get on top of it? And if he's saying, is it right to get if you want to make a speech out in somewhere to get on top of somebody's car and walk on top of it? Second of all, y'all want to remove statues of all these in the southern states. If you go back and listen to the show that was on Channel 5 on Sunday night, 60 Minutes, the lady that runs the Constitution Museum in Philadelphia said that everybody that signed the Constitution owned slaves. So if you want to remove those slaves, you need to remove the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial Monument.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Gail, for those. I'm going to ask about the police car second. That other thing I kind of ask about, but yeah, that is one of the arguments, a major argument. You take down Nathan Bedford Forrest, a slave trader. He started the KKK. That sounds, like that's somebody you could take down. But then, do you take down every person who ever owned slaves, all of our founding fathers? Where does it end? Is the argument that we're hearing a lot. What do you say to that?
Gail, Sister Gail, thank you for your question. I think that what we need to do is we need to examine, we need to have community conversations about why these monuments were put up in the first place. Because when these monuments went up, people who look like me were not involved in the conversation. And so we need to ask ourselves, why is that? Why is it that in Tennessee, the majority of statues are white men who were racist, and we don't have statues to Tennesseans like Ida B. Wells? We don't have statues to people like Diane Nash, who led a revolution here. We don't have statues of people like John Lewis, but we have statues to Nathan Bedford Forrest and Sam, the Confederate hero boy. Why is that? Why do we have something that honors Andrew Jackson but not the Cherokees whose land was stolen here in Tennessee? And so I think we have to ask ourselves these questions. I'm not really as concerned about markers and monuments as I am about people. And so I do think that we have to ask a question about our history. We have to tell the truth about our history. And if that starts the trajectory of saying, well, why do we honor these other people? I think that's important because we don't learn these things in school. And I think our young people need to hear these things, the truth about our history, because that is a road to truth and reconciliation and redemption.
And her other question was about the car. It was a police car. She said, would you have gotten on top of a civilian's car? Was it appropriate for you to get on top of that car?
If there was any platform, yeah, I would get on the platform to make an announcement. Nothing was damaged. Also, that police car was public property that we pay for. And so we have a right to address people. And so, again, if you're more concerned with objects, I just ask people like Gail, we have this absurdity with objects, but we don't hear that outrage when it comes to people like George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor being murdered. Where's the outrage there, Sister Gail? Where's the outrage there, Governor Lee, Representative Holt? All these other lawmakers who are so concerned with markers and buildings which are, maybe they are important, but who have nothing to say when it comes to Black lives murdered in the streets of America.
All right, we'll take a break. Come back, take more calls right after this.